this is the part where if you're going to proceed with an insurance claim, you have to wait for the insurance company. People can get into some pretty mucky waters when they start repairing things themselves and try and submit those invoices after the fact. The insurance company absolutely wants the chance to hop in there, just be able to assess the situation and get their determination of where that water came or how that loss started. That really helps them confirm that there is actual coverage in the policy. And then they absolutely need to be a part of the quoting process because they will want their contractors to give quotes. As a homeowner, you are, of course, welcome to have your own contractors provide quotes, but the adjuster is going to review all those and you'll decide as a team how to best proceed with their repair process.
Welcome to the How Canada Works podcast. I'm Trevor Miller. With me as always is Adrian Blake. Adrian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Trevor. Thank you for asking. It is a beautiful sunny day where I am anyways. And, a lot of days I wish I wasn't so weather activated, but when it's this nice out, I appreciate the motivation the sun provides.
Which is really, really nice considering, what just happened in the GTA with the floods and everything like that, which, is really just so great in who we're about to talk to, somebody who deals with this sort of thing on a regular basis. Really excited to talk to Sam Pietras, senior executive with MSP Insurance. Really excited to be able to ask her all these questions about some of these natural occurrences that we're seeing happen a lot more regularly.
Yeah, we're seeing, natural disasters, right? Like we talk about the wildfires in BC. If you remember last summer, we had significant fires in Quebec and smoke all through Quebec and Ontario. And then, I remember seeing pictures of New York City with like that yellow haze all through it. And that's not to speak of the water that we've seen in the Toronto and Burlington areas just last week. I couldn't believe the flooding. So I think it's a very topical and timely conversation. And I'm curious to find out what this actually means for insurance as an industry and then for individuals as clients of that insurance industry.
Absolutely. So before we hop onto that, make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, and let's go talk to Sam.
Let's do it.
Hey, welcome, Sam. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Not too bad.
Doing very well, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for having me out today. I'm excited to talk about insurance claims.
we're excited too. As funny as that is, that talking about insurance is usually not something people get really excited about. But I think you and I think started talking about doing this a year ago, like even before we started this podcast. Adrian and I think you and I had a brief conversation about getting on and doing this. And it was right as the Kelowna fires and all of that were happening. And it seemed like there was a bit of a change in just insurance. And we saw California, I think it was the state where they pulled one of the major insurance companies actually pulled out of there. So I think you and I had a conversation a year ago. So I've been waiting for a year to have this conversation with you on this. So I'm super excited as well.
Toronto's been underwater since, so it's good timing. Now we have fire and water to talk about.
Yeah, we're just going to cover all the bases here. Really, really excited to do that.
Yeah, so it was a pretty exciting week in the insurance world and the weather world last week for Ontario. Water came in volumes that we haven't seen in over a decade. I think it was actually just over a decade. It was 2013 when the last time we saw water of that amount come in. So,
and was that the Toronto? Like, I was trying to think about that before when Toronto seemed to be underwater, and I think there was that video or picture of like somebody's Lamborghini or Ferrari in one of the underpasses. Yep. Is that was 2013?
Yes.
Eh?
Yeah, that was 2013, and
wow.
And very similar this time around. Not as bad as 2013. But some of the footage that we saw, like in Mississauga, there was a Dixie and Dundas. But one of the intersections close by there, it was just a river flowing down. We have the Markland golf course in Etobicoke. That was just completely covered in water. Like you couldn't even see grass anymore. It was just full on flood coming down. So, it's
It was the same at Glen Abbey in Oakville. It's in a bit of a valley, and it was just completely flooded out as well. And I mean, it's hosted the Canadian Open. It's a really fantastic course, and just in shambles.
Yeah, so I want to hear all about I want to hear about your week, Sam. I want to hear about how this.
I mean, as a broker, our main role in these things, because obviously, like, we're not claims adjusters, we're not out there on the field actually like helping people get back on their feet. But the main role of a broker is just helping people understand kind of what they need to do, especially when there's larger ones where it might be a 6 or 7 hour hold to get your insurance company on the phone. So it's great that you can call your broker and kind of get an idea of where to take things. Maybe we start there. Like, maybe we start with, you're standing in your basement and you now have water. Like, what are some things to consider?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Perfect. What is, the first step? What do you suggest as a broker? What do people have to worry about?
Okay, so I'm actually going to change what I said. We're going to step one step before you have water in your basement, because I think the very, very important first step, and sometimes, especially for personal policies, when we're talking home insurance, a lot of people look at the price. They want to know how much it's going to cost them per month, cost them per year. They may not actually take the time to get into what their policy has and what you are going to be covered for. Which is very important when it comes to water, because if you have water in your home, whether you have coverage or not is going to come down to how that water got into your house. And this is something that has changed significantly over the last decade. Prior to actually that 2013 flood we had here, home insurance policies didn't have coverage for flood. You could buy sewer backup coverage, but that was it. That's all that you could buy. Now, a true sewer backup claim, that would be an issue with the city. That lovely stuff is like the city system can't take it, and it's coming back up through pipes and into your home. That's all people had coverage for. After the 2013 laws, companies found, the insurance companies found that they ended up paying out a bunch of claims that they shouldn't have, just because they couldn't adjust them quick enough. There were so many people, there's this wild influx of things that they just had to write checks. Like, maybe they were getting to people weeks after it had happened, and it was hard to actually determine where that water came from. So if sewer backup was on the policy and that coverage was evident, even though that water that was in that person's home maybe came in from like an overflow of water, like overland water or seepage through the foundation, they weren't able to determine it. So they ended up paying for a lot of losses they should not have. So what they did is like, okay, well, if this ever happens again, why don't we just charge a premium for these coverages and call them all the various different things we need to call them, and let's roll out some broader coverage when it comes to water. So now, on your home policy, you have options to buy sewer backup. So we've already talked about where that comes from. You have options to buy overland water. So this would be a flood from a fresh body of water. Or it could also be that sudden pooling. So the rain's coming down so fast, the ground is saturated, it has nowhere else to go, it starts to rise up, it's coming into your home through an above water source. So through a window well, through a door frame, it's somehow getting in. That's your overland water. And then the third one you can buy is groundwater. So now we have that same thought. The ground is so saturated, and it's actually like seeping through your foundation walls. So over the last 10 years, it's taken companies, they've rolled them out at various steps, and most companies now offer all three, but not all companies do. So these are three very important things to ask about, like home insurance. Which ones do you have? And also, what is your coverage limit for these? Because if you're in a high-risk territory, some companies may only give you $25,000 worth of coverage. You don't have your full policy limits. And that's where it's really important to shop around, because if you have ABC insurance that's going to insure you for $2,000 and DEF insurance is going to insure you for $3,000, it's not just the price. Like ABC may not even offer groundwater to begin with. So it's very important to take some time, understand what you have in your policy. And if you're missing some of those, are there companies out there that can actually give you that coverage?
Yeah, it sounds like you're not going to get lucky this time around, that your overland water claim is going to get lost in a sewer backup claim and you're going to get paid. If the coverages are available and you didn't choose them, you're not going to be covered.
Exactly. And they actually have built in a clause right into the policy. It's a concurrent clause. So if you have a sewer backup loss and a flood loss at the same time, but you've only purchased sewer backup, they're not paying any of it.
Wow. Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So you definitely need to have a look at what's there and take them all. If you can, take them all.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on something interesting in just what you were saying there with it could take several weeks for this to happen. And I think, what I'd love to talk about a lot more today is kind of more of these massive pieces of insurance that we're seeing, where it is going, so much broader than what I think insurance was initially designed for. As far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, insurance was more designed for those one-off individual kind of instances, like that sewer backup that happens to one family, one claim process. And now with what we're seeing happen in the world, and call it global warming, call it whatever you want, but it seems like there's a lot more of things happening en masse. And I think right now, as we're talking, there's 370 wildfires burning in BC. They've got 70 evacuation alerts or orders in place right now. Massive, insurance potential claims on that. What you're seeing in Ontario and kind of that GTA area with, just tons of flooding. I think, half the people I have on Instagram are either having some sort of flood or have a friend that's having a flood, or we're just seeing these in just massive kind of quantities here. So how, obviously your company and the companies that you place clients with are not necessarily designed to be taken on hundreds and hundreds or thousands of calls on any given thing at a time. So how do you help, or what are some of the things? Because I'm sure in this moment that these people are going through a really horrible time in their life, to be on hold for several hours, or to be going through these things that now the claim process seems to be taking so long. How do you help with that? What are some ways either around that or to deal with it, or like what are you talking to people about?
So there's definitely two parts to a claim. So you have the loss happen, whatever it is that you're dealing with. Let's call it water. Part one is you got to take care of that water. We got to stop it from coming in. You got to get it dried out. And both of those things need to happen before anyone can even think about repairing the situation. So as a homeowner, as a business owner, even if I'm going to have an insurance claim, that is my house, that is my business, that is my responsibility to protect. So there is no harm in getting started on step one if you can't get your insurance company involved for you. Because to your point, Trev, if you're that one house on the street that's had a sewer backup, you're likely going to call your insurance company. You're going to get an adjuster on the phone right away. They're going to be like, hey, I'm going to get a restoration team out to you. We're going to take care of this. They are fantastic at walking people through the process when they are not bombarded with 1,000 claims all at once. They're fantastic at handling the catastrophic cases as well. It just does take time. So definitely take ownership of that situation, because I don't want to say they're not going to argue with you about the costs. They might argue with you about the costs. But I mean, there's an argument to be had there. If you are dealing with a significant water issue and you have to get that restoration team in, there's no time to get quotes. Okay. And your kind of worst case there is if it's not covered, it wouldn't have been covered had you have talked to the insurance company first. You're going to be on the hook for that restoration bill. But hey, that is your home. You need to get the water out of there. You need to secure the location. Your kind of second worst scenario is they're like, oh, whoa, these guys gouged you. Like, we wouldn't have paid $3,000 for that work with any of our teams. We would have only paid $2,000. So maybe there's an argument there about that restoration bill. But I think we can all agree there's never going to be a harm in getting the restoration done and making sure that the loss doesn't actually get worse. Because I mean, the rainwater that we had come in is a perfect example. If rainwater comes into your home and you stop it and you dry it, rainwater's like relatively clean. The restoration guys are going to test it. They're going to make sure there's no gross bacteria and whatnot. But if you can get that dried out really quickly, there's a good chance you can save flooring, you can save contents. I mean, drywall might have to come out just because it's not meant to get wet. But there's a really good chance you are going to save yourself and your insurance company thousands of dollars because you are able to take care of it right from the start. We work with restoration companies all the time. And I was thinking about this, getting ready for this podcast, is that homeowners should just go to their local restoration company just when they have nothing to do one day and meet the owner, say hi, like get to know them. Like, why not? Like, it's if you have a medical emergency, you can call 911. You have a fire in your house, you call 911. Like, you take care of those emergencies before an insurance company is involved. And water is no different. Like, why not know the emergency person to call so that you're prepared for that? And hey, and if you know the guy or girl and you have a good rapport with them and you've checked in with them every once in a while, and then you call them when you have help, who knows? Maybe they come see you before they see the other 100 calls that they're getting that day. So I think definitely another great preventative step is to know who to go to. And that's our step one. That's making sure that the home is secure. So now we have the first part done. We've taken care of the restoration, and we're going to head into part 2 of a claim. And part 2 of the claim is the repair work. So the house has been secured. We know everything is safe, but now we've got to tear things out. We've got to, replace flooring, rebuild some walls, whatever it may be. This is the part where if you're going to proceed with an insurance claim, you have to wait for the insurance company. People can get into some pretty mucky waters when they start repairing things themselves and try and submit those invoices after the fact. The insurance company absolutely wants the chance to hop in there, just be able to assess the situation, get their determination of where that water came or how that loss started. That really helps them confirm that there is actual coverage in the policy. And then they absolutely need to be a part of the quoting process because they will want their contractors to give quotes. As a homeowner, you are of course welcome to have your own contractors provide quotes, but the adjuster is going to review all those, and you'll decide as a team how to best proceed with the repair process.
Yeah, and Sam, for just put it out there. You and I have worked together. You've helped place my insurance policies several times. I've had a couple claims, and not on floods or things like that. But the process that I went through with those companies was very much like what you've outlined there, where I had a couple of bikes stolen from my garage. There was a little bit of damage to the garage itself. And it was, back and forth. They had an app where I kind of showed them, through video what had happened. Nobody actually came to my place on this one in particular, but it was so smooth. And, I sent them the details that they'd asked for. They got back to me right away. It was such an easy process when it was just kind of followed, as opposed to try and jump ahead or do something different. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They wanted to see what was going on. They wanted to make sure that they checked their boxes to make sure that what I was saying was legitimate as they should. And then the rest of the process was actually quite painless.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And Trev, you were in a position where you have nicer bikes. You're a biking guy, so you were able to produce receipts and really prove what was stolen. So that would have made that claim very easy for the adjuster to adjust. Which is another really important thing to think of when you're setting up your home. You're starting to invest in your furniture, you're investing in your leisure, your sports. Think to yourself, like, what do I buy? Am I sort of an average person and I get my furniture from the Brick or IKEA, or am I hopping into more expensive specialty stores? Because when an adjuster goes, let's say it's a fire, let's say your whole house has been burnt down. When an adjuster starts to look at your contents, we know that you sit on a couch. We know that you watch a TV. We know that you sleep in a bed. So to say, well, I had a 3-bedroom house, so I have 3 bedroom sets, a living room set, and a dining room set to replace, I don't have receipts, but it's pretty standard stuff. These are the stores that I've bought them from. An adjuster can go on that. They can help sort of get a replacement value based on current pricing. But if if you're not the person that's buying the $2,000 couch from the Brick, you have bought a $20,000 Lazy Boy entertainment system in your basement, those are types of purchases where you want to have a paper trail on just to prove what you had. Often in fire losses, we can still see the debris, where you can kind of see what's there. But some you can't. Some are pretty bad. So any sort of specialty things you want to make sure you're keeping track of. And once a year, maybe twice a year, take your phone and do a video of your house, just sort of room to room, just to give an idea of what you have, because those types of things are really going to help when you need it. And not many people think about doing that, because
that's such a neat trick I never would have thought of.
My parents did that back in the 80s with the camcorder. And then, I remember them going through and doing that, and they would log it, and they would take out that VHS thing, go bring it to the bank, put it in the safety deposit. But it's a little bit easier now, right? Because you can and then it goes to the cloud, and it's done.
No firebox required, no safety deposit box required. You can just email that to yourself and have it forever.
Yeah, exactly. And for some of these bigger ticket items, like that $20,000 Lazy Boy that I'm just now picturing, that's all I'm not even going to listen to the rest of this. All I'm thinking about is how do I get a $20,000 comfy Lazy Boy in my basement? But for some of those bigger purchases like that, if you go get some jewelry, or, that's usually where we think about reaching out to you and making sure that's, a listed item. But are some of these things stuff that you should know as well as the broker or the insurance company should know when it's, I want to say just furniture, but a 20,000 Lazy Boy is definitely more than just furniture.
So for most policies, there is a list of items that will have a set limit. Now so jewelry are examples. Bikes can be on there. If you're bringing work items home from you, there's a maximum for business contents. There's some smaller boats and motors can be included in the home policy. So there is definitely a list of items that have it's called the special limits list. So have a look at that. So that's more pertaining to things like theft or damage out in the world. When it comes to a fire in your home, there's no set limit for any item. You have up to your contents limit. Now, for a lot of policies for a contents limit, we don't try and get people to guess how much they own on a home insurance policy. Condo and tenants, that's different. You very much have to guess what you own. But on a home insurance policy, let's say that the value of the home is $1 million. The policy is going to default to normally about 75 to 80% for contents coverage. So you're going to have, in the 80% example, you're going to have $800,000 to replace your contents. So you do have to be mindful of that limit. If you have a lot of expensive stuff, and you are going to be capped out there. But where we get into scheduling items, it's a really good feature, because no one's guessing what you had. If it's a ring, we know the exact specifications of the diamonds. We know if there's an appraisal on file, we know exactly what it's worth. Same thing with bikes. You can endorse those onto your policy. We have the serial number. You add in a brand new $2,000 shock system. We get that added on as well. It's just a great way to make sure that those very what's the word I'm looking for? Those very personal and secret items are taken care of. And also to make sure that they're probably covered if they are stolen. But if they're in the home and there's a fire, then the special limits don't apply the same way.
I have a self-serving question. On the bikes, what happens if you buy any kind of these toys, but you don't buy it brand new, so you don't have a receipt? Can you still get this kind of stuff coverage? And I'm thinking about my bikes, but I suppose it wouldn't be any different for anything like an ATV or small boat or any of those things.
And that's just it. You bought it off of Kijiji. These items are going to have kind of a face value to them. Just so I mean, you can definitely keep track of that purchase, like keep the email thread of the person you spoke with in Kijiji, keep a record of the e-transfer that you sent for that amount. And then plus you are going to know the make, model, and serial number of the bike as well.
Yep.
Something you said a little while ago, and regarding the floods and the changes that happened in the insurance world because of that, that actually kind of surprised me a little bit. But I get it was, I don't want to say self-serving, but they also wanted to make sure that as these things came up, that they charged their clients for what they were now providing as a service, right? And that makes a lot of sense. But with what we're seeing in the US, especially with some of these companies pulling out, and then in Ontario to be adding some of these coverages, is this something that we're seeing more of with I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are we moving more towards charging more for some of these en masse natural disaster type situations? Or are we going to see limitations being put down? And obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but you might have a little bit of insight in what's kind of happening with that.
So on the water side, it's not just a flat, it's available in Ontario and everyone can buy it. Each company has their own sort of flood mapping that they do based on, just actually, I can't see that word.
Actuarially. Yeah. It's a tough one.
Based on their own data.
Yeah, there you go.
And just sort of like historic claims. So they do look at that and they'll say, hey, for this, this postal code, we're just not going to offer coverage, or we're only going to offer X amount. The risk is just too high. So we do see on water, they are looking to restrict coverage or just charge a significant amount for it. So, in right. Toronto, Mississauga, your sort of standard higher level territories, you're probably paying $200 a year for something like overland water. But if you're in a valley, if you're in a high risk area, they might ask for $800 a year for that coverage. So we do see some restriction on availability. No one's started to roll it back yet, though, Trevor. In the last, we had sewer backup. They rolled out overland. Since then, they've rolled out groundwater. They're now offering things like service line protection. So they've seemed to be expanding it. I don't know when that's going to stop, or when they're going to decide, hey, this was a mistake. We should start rolling it back. But yeah, as of right now, no one's rolled back. And then I do think what we've seen, like what we saw in Florida and California, is we just had insurance companies just leave the state. It wasn't. Yeah. I think most companies, especially in Florida, have always had some sort of restriction on hurricane coverage. I think it's standard to have your homeowner's policy and you have a hurricane policy. But yeah, no one, I don't think in Ontario yet, is just starting to pull out.
Yeah, and I wonder how that will evolve over time. And you obviously don't have a crystal ball, but you see some of these places like Florida where you're going to get hurricanes. Like it's happened every year, like that I can remember. I think the intensity on some of them are getting a little bit more over the last couple of years, but it seemed to be, you're going to live here, this is probably what's going to happen. And I think we're starting to see now where last year we had a lot of fires in Ontario and Quebec, which was way out of the norm. Seeing this flood happen recently, that's pretty far out the norm. And as we start getting more of these things happening, that could shift. But it's an interesting dynamic that we're kind of seeing now play out.
No, and definitely hard to know what's going to come up in the future. I mean, right now the only restriction we have on fire, because for insurance policies, that was the first peril. The first peril ever, on a policy, was fire. That's how these policies started. So for them to just start removing fire from a policy, I don't know what the world would look like for them to do that. The restrictions we do see on fire is they will take away brokers' binding authority within a certain radius of a wildfire. So this would be for new policies. So if your policy is currently in place, no problem. But if you've decided to roll a dice and not insure your home, you can't call as a wildfires heading towards you and try and set up coverage. They removed binding authority. Mostly 50% of the time, 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 50% between 50 and 100 kilometers of a wildfire, depending on the company. That's the range. So, I mean, for most of us, we would think that's no big deal. But how many, Trevor, did you say are active in BC right now?
370.
So, like, what if you're moving? Like, what if you're moving and you need to set up a home insurance for the first time? You didn't do anything bad. You didn't wait. It's just you bought a house, it's closing, and you want to make sure it's still there with you when you move.
Yeah, and your mortgage company requires you to have fire protection in order to close on the sale.
Yeah. And is that something? So if I have insurance through you and I move in from, Burlington, Ontario to a place that has, an active fire within that range, is that policy transferable, or is it now I have to get a whole new policy and that fire would be not?
So we don't rewrite policies. We would just make a policy change. However, each new risk is still assessed as if it's brand new. So when we say they were removing that binding authority, I couldn't put a policy change.
Okay.
So to your point, it wouldn't matter if you're an existing client or not. You'd be in some trouble if you were in that zone.
And how much, like, when it comes to claims, how much does your role as a broker have to, like, how much influence do you have? Like, you were talking earlier about how you're not an adjuster. That's not your role. So can the brokers be involved? How much of a contribution or hindrance can they be? Does it matter? Is this one of the places where a broker is actually valuable?
So for the most part, insurance companies, they're there to adjust claims, and they do a great job of it. An adjuster should be an easy person to work with. So quite often when a broker would need to get involved is, maybe that's not the case in this situation. The clients, for whatever reason, maybe the adjuster is trying to just get through files because they have so many. Things aren't being explained as well as they could. So that's a great place to look for a broker. They can kind of you run things by them. If you're not understanding what was said, they can help you walk through it. Also, if it sounds off, like to the broker, if your experience isn't the way it should be, or, I've seen this claim adjusted 100 times one way and this is happening different, I would absolutely call the adjuster and try and see what's going on and work towards a resolution. If you're in a situation where you're not sure if you want to put a claim, that is a fantastic time to get your broker involved. For example, we had a client with some water coming through their roof. First, he claims to go to the insurance company, and then I'm looking at their deductible, and I'm like, hey, I don't know. So hopped out there, helped them get in touch with the restoration company. We got the restoration process taken care of, and now we're waiting to see what the actual damage is. So we will know a number, or a pretty close number of what that damage is going to be, so they can decide, okay, do I actually want to put this claim on my policy, or hey, my deductible is $10,000 and this loss is only $15,000. So what's the point? At least they're able to make that decision. So definitely another thing to reach out to your broker. Having said that, though, if you have, if you're standing in your basement and you're a foot deep in sewer backup, and you have sewer backup on your policy, there's not much you need to get from your broker. You can just put that claim in.
Yeah,
sure.
You bought the policy. It's happened now. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think as a homeowner, some people do get very hesitant to take care of things when they think it's going to be an insurance claim. So, and I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I'm going to say it again, it's so important to take ownership of that situation. You don't have to wait for an insurance company to start mitigating the damage and preventing more from happening. And when it comes to water, I actually ended up with some water in my garage in this last one because we have a nice downward sloping driveway. Luckily, I own a sump pump, so I just got out there with the sump pump and set my hose off to the street and got it all drained out. It was a garage, so I didn't have to put a claim through. I could dry everything that was in there. But not a lot of people own a sump pump. So, there's some things that you could own in your house. We all have smoke alarms. We should all have fire extinguishers. Why not add a portable sump pump to your emergency preparedness kit? Because if you have water pumping into your basement at 2:00 in the morning, maybe you still need to get a restoration team out, but why not start that process earlier on your own and help to move it forward?
Yeah, definitely a few things to get before you need it. Yeah, it's better to have that at 2 a.m. and be able to get that water out as opposed to, oh, shoot, Canadian Tire's
Yeah.
not open at 2 a.m.
I was gonna say even Amazon takes 2 days. Like,
Yeah. And probably even more when everybody's going through the same issues. So on kind of, we talked about the kind of those first two steps. Now we're kind of going through the claim process, and on the other side where things need to get rebuilt. We saw a huge issues during COVID, especially with building materials and all of these things. I've talked to some people out west who are still out of their house, 3 years later, and there's no shovels in the ground and the house is burnt down and things along those lines. What's, again, just on these en masse kind of issues, we talked about how, like, it's really pretty simple when it's just you, sewer backed up, somebody comes in, they take care of it. But when it's a bigger issue, what are you seeing? What are some ways that people can maybe push this process along a little bit quicker, or is there anything?
So if you're going through insurance, when we're on that step 2, okay, like step 1, do what you got to do. Get the restoration team in. Let's not wait for the insurance company's preferred restoration team. If you can find someone that get in there and take care of it faster, go right ahead. On the step 2, when it comes to once the house is secured, that part is definitely the slower part. So what insurance companies have started to do to help move things along is they are getting a lot better at cash settlements. So if it's the insurance company's contractor that you're using, you're going to kind of be at their whim as far as the timelines. But if you've gotten a quote for the same amount of work, and that quote is lower than what the insurance company's contractor was going to charge, you can ask about a cash settlement. So it's going to depend on the case. Every company has like their threshold, what they'll do for cash settlement, but typically on the lower end. So I'd say let's say less than 20,000. They may just cut you the check so you can work with your own guy and do it at your own pace. So that's definitely one thing to inquire about. But unfortunately, sometimes when we do have these mass losses, like, it's not just the restoration companies and the insurance companies that are busy. Contractors are equally as busy trying to get to everyone. So it does take time. In your policy, everyone, there's four main coverages. You have your building for your house, you have your detached structures, you have your contents, and you have your additional living expenses. And it's those additional living expenses that are going to pay for you to live in another home or be in a hotel while your house is unlivable. So it's a very important limit to be mindful of how much money you actually have. Again, on homeowners policies, it's a default amount. It's normally about 20%. So in that $1 million home example, you have $200,000 of living expense coverage. So you might be okay. It's a bit higher. Condos and tenants tend to be lower, but you can ask for more. So definitely a question to ask your insurance rep. And then a lot of policies have something called a single limit endorsement. So in those 4 coverages that we talked about, so I've got my $1 million home, my $800,000 contents. Let's say my outbuildings are at a 10% coverage, so I have $100,000 there, and I have my 20% additional living, so I have $200,000 there. If I don't have any outbuildings, then I can move that money over to my additional living expense. So it kind of makes like a global limit for the policy, and that's a really nice feature to have so that you don't have to be as concerned about running out of that additional living expense.
Very interesting. So switching gears a little, Trevor and I sell life insurance. We're licensed to sell life insurance. And every once in a while, I run into somebody who doesn't like life insurance or doesn't like insurance in general. And I think it comes from either an experience or a story they've heard, often from automotive insurance. I think there's an incentive there where the insurance companies have a reputation for not wanting to pay claims or not paying what might be deemed as fair. And life insurance doesn't have that problem. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. If you're dead, then money for your family. Like, this is not rocket science at that point. But do you see ever from a broker's point of view where you're not, adjudicating a claim here in any way, with getting the appropriate coverage, claimed on for people who are in a sticky situation?
So on the property side and auto insurance side, the wordings are pretty clear. If there's like, especially your standard homeowner's policy these days is an all perils policy. And what that means is you are covered for everything except for the list of exclusions that we attach. And those policies are very easy to determine if you have coverage in, because literally if they missed one and they didn't think about it and put it on the exclusion list, then you have coverage for it. So that's definitely the form of insurance that you want to be on. On the personal line side, it is called an all risk policy. For our commercial policies, it would be called a broad form of insurance. That is where I've never seen someone who had coverage be denied a claim. That's just it's just not the case. I think where we see people really like getting upset or kind of blaming the insurance company. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the times they didn't understand what they had on their policy, and which is why it's just so important to have a look at it. And you probably don't have to do it once a year, depending on your sort of aptitude for insurance jargon. If you just take an hour of your broker's or your agent's time and just go over each line and say, I want to know what these things mean. I want to know like what I am covered for, and I want to understand this list of exclusions. And then lists of exclusions are very, very common. They're not sort of out to trick anyone or get there. It's just things that shouldn't be insured. So, a very common home insurance exclusion that people get angry about is wear and tear or faulty workmanship. So, especially like if you have a contractor come into your home, and let's say they've installed a dishwasher and the dishwasher is a dud and like their installation kind of ruined it and it was $4,000 dishwasher and now you're out that money. Well, like that's not an insurance claim. Like you would need to go back to that contractor and get them to replace the unit that they've damaged. Having said that, if that contractor that dishwasher causes a pipe to disconnect and water's flowing through your home, you're going to have coverage through that. The ensuing damage from it is going to be covered, but the actual unit itself is not going to be covered. So that is something that people can get very angry about. And then the wear and tear. Like I remember I had a phone call from a client. He's like, "Hey, I got a few things going on here. Like windows need to be replaced, and like my furnace is on the fritz, and I'd like to start a claim." I'm like, I can't help you with those things. Those are just unfortunately the cost of doing business when there's a home to take care of.
My brakes are going. That's called the insurance company. And Sam, and again, like you and I have worked together, and I don't want to make that clear to everybody that I have worked with you, and part of what we did and went through this, and you talked about this, just knowing what's on your policy, and I think if you understand what that policy entails, then you just have a clearer idea. And you were wrong that I didn't have any receipts. And that's why you placed me with the person that you placed me with, because I bought it directly from the bike dealership. So I didn't have the same receipts. So by having that conversation with you on the bikes and everything like that, we were able to place it with, I don't think we had a rider. I think it was just the company that you decided to work with was just covered that in a different way. So we really dove into all the things that we had and, the risks that were there and walked through it, as opposed to me just going on to, I don't even know what it is, an insurance, policy.com kind of thing and trying to do it myself and maybe missing out on something like that. So, big endorsement for you and just brokers in general, and being able to walk through it with somebody who is very, very good at what they do. Really honestly saved me thousands and thousands of dollars on having to replace those bikes. So, that was well worth the time, in my opinion, that we spent, kind of going through that.
Thank you, Travis. Yeah, sorry, I'm recalling now. So In your case, so that special limits list I was referring to, the company we put you with didn't have bikes on that list. So we didn't have to endorse on your bikes. They just didn't have a limit set for bikes, and that's why we went with them. I remember now.
It's been a while.
Sam has my my insurance policies as well, so in the interest of disclosure, that's probably important. But and I've had similar good experiences. I'm thinking now it's probably time for me to use an hour of your time and go through my coverages and exclusions, and consider whether I'm still with the right insurance policy, because it's been a few years. And so, how often is it appropriate to poke your broker about this kind of making a change? Because I think the default is you've made the right decision at the time, and then assumed that nothing has changed from there, and you probably don't review your policy as often as you probably should. So how often should you?
So great question. So I mean, definitely, if there's changes going on in your life, it's a great time to touch base. Very, very important to actually read your annual renewal that comes out from your insurance company, because if they change their wordings, if they make significant changes to coverage, they have to let you know. So there is a nice cover letter letting you know if anything has changed. But other than that, I mean, like, if you've done that legwork, that initial legwork of talking with your broker, and you have a really good understanding of your policy, just do it as you see fit. Like we have clients that absolutely love to do that on an annual basis. They ask the same questions every year, and we are happy to answer the same answers every year, because it makes them comfortable, and we know that they're educated about their product. So yeah, just as often as you need. Sometimes if you haven't talked about it in 3 years, you may have forgotten what they told you. But I am going to add on to my take an hour of your broker's time comment. Call them
Yes.
and just expect the hour at that very moment. Let them know you would like to set that time up. But yeah, just because in a broker's world, there are things popping up all the time, and they want to make sure they have time to have that conversation with you. So I would definitely recommend scheduling an appointment.
So like when there's a big flood going on, that's maybe not the best time to call and
probably not. You may get the short broker on those days.
Yeah.
I consider myself lucky. I didn't have to have a conversation with you. I was sitting at lunch while the rains were coming down, and I couldn't see the sign for the bright red Shoppers Drug Mart sign right across the street from the restaurant I was sitting in front of. And it was all done by the time I had left lunch. And if I turned right out of the parking lot, I would have been the person on the news with the car floating in a giant puddle. But I turned left, and so I didn't even realize how bad the flooding was until I got home, as it turns out. But yeah, what a spectacular amount of rain in such an incredibly short period of time.
It was just wild, and I thought it was so wild. Like normally, my weather app would be going crazy, saying like, "Beware, flood again is coming." But like I felt this one came without a warning. It was a good one.
Yeah, I agree. What haven't we asked you that we should ask you, Sam? What's the insurance question that people ask that we haven't thought of?
Oh my, that's a good question. Well, there's so much, Adrian. There's like 100 pages of policy wording. So I don't know. Like we've definitely covered the basics. I think.
Okay.
I mean, if I could sort of wrap up the advice here, insurance may seem like a very standard product, but it is very personal. Everyone has their own uniqueness in their home. They all have their own hobbies. So get to know your insurance professional, be comfortable, and like sharing kind of the cool things that you have going on. And just, have those conversations well ahead of having to think about a claim going on in your home. And then, and I actually like my advice of get to know a restoration company. Chat with your broker, find a local restoration company, know how to get a hold of them, and then lastly, like take ownership of a claim situation, and take ownership of your stuff. Like everyone, we all work really hard. We use our hard-earned money to buy the things that we love in our home. Go take those videos to make sure that you can help replace those things.
Yeah, and I know both Trevor and I have our bikes bolted to the wall, so it's those kinds of things as well.
That doesn't help in a fire, but definitely helps with the
Yes.
theft side. So
Exactly.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sam. Definitely really appreciate that. You know, a lot going on in your world, you know, this past week or so. So definitely appreciate you taking the time to do this, and probably put a lot of people's minds at ease, or, you know, have them going and having a look at it. You know, just given the context of what's going on, this is probably a really good time for a lot of people to go and make sure that they have the right coverage in this crazy world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you guys having me on today. This was a lot of fun.
Nice to chat with you, Sam. Thank you so much. So, Trevor, I thought that was a spectacular conversation with Sam. She covered a ton of ground. She obviously focused a lot on the housing insurance industry as opposed to like auto or commercial. But I think with all the flooding that we've seen lately in the GTA, like that's what really resonates at the moment. And I think, you know, I learned a lot. I was reminded of a lot. I definitely appreciated the conversation there with Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there's only so much time to pick her brain in this context anyways. And just after what has happened here, and you see what's going on in BC with the wildfires, you see what's going on in Ontario with the flooding. It just seems like, you know, there's so much going on. And I was actually really surprised with the fact that some of those insurance companies have added these claims to make sure that they are covered, give a little more clarity on what is there. You know, we always think, and you and I, like you mentioned, are in the more, you know, life insurance side of things. But insurance companies, even from my standpoint, a lot of times you think of it as this big, dirty, mean kind of entity.
It's us versus them, right? But it's not.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, they want to make sure that if there's a claim there, they're going to put the money out. And if it's not there, then maybe you should just have that look with your broker or yourself, if you understand it, and just make sure what's covered or what you think's covered is actually covered.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know what I'm doing with my afternoon. I'm going to have my iPhone out and be running around my house making videos of all the stuff I own, and, you know, checking some of those boxes. And apparently I need to call the local, you know, disaster restoration guy and see if we can have a lunch or something. You know, things I wouldn't have thought of before.
See, I ride bikes with a guy locally here, so you know, I've got that covered. Yeah, exactly. So
perfect.
Yeah, lots to do, you know, and I think at the end of the day, it's such an interesting conversation, and, you know, kind of has me as well going back and thinking about everything that I have, and just making sure, you know, even if it's going to cost me a couple extra dollars, it's probably better to pay that now than all of a sudden to be going and put in a claim when, you know, that massive disaster happens, and hopefully not, but, you know, and not being able to put a claim in. And, you know, like I said in when we were talking with Sam, I had that go through with my bikes, and it probably cost me a little bit more to make sure that was done. But when my bikes actually got stolen, and I had you know, a couple high-end bikes stolen, you know, it was just so easy because it was covered. It was there. There was no questions. It was, you know, super easy process.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a pretty positive claims process in a minor fender bender a few years ago where I was rear-ended, and same sort of thing. You know, the company that Sam had me with, and I think I'm still insured with them. It was really a smooth claims process. And my thing was, I had my bike rack on the back of the car and it was damaged, and they just, you know, I didn't think they were going to cover it because it's not the car. Right. But if it's attached to the car, then they do cover it. So I appreciate that, because those things are silly expensive for what they are. And, you know, luckily my bikes weren't on the rack, but the rack was toast. So I was glad to have it covered in addition to my vehicle, obviously.
And speaking about bikes, Adrian, it's a blue sky day there. You're working
hard. I'm talking to you.
There's been lots of rain. Go. Let's say goodbye so you can go get a ride in. Go enjoy some of this blue sky here.
Sounds good. Thank you, Trevor. And for our listeners, just another reminder to like, follow, subscribe. If you are enjoying these conversations, then perhaps you will want to hear more of them. And if you subscribe, then you will. Thanks.
Wonderful. Happy investing.
Take care.